It was just another ordinary morning in the shared apartment. Jake had already woken up late as usual, and he hurried to make his coffee. The smell of the fresh brew filled the room, mixing with the morning light that streamed through the window. His alien roommate, Cora, was sitting in the living room, reading something on her device. Cora had been living with Jake for about a month now, and while their friendship was new, they had started to get used to each other's quirks. Jake was still trying to wrap his mind around the fact that he shared an apartment with an alien. Cora wasn't what people usually imagined when they thought of aliens. She wasn't tall or intimidating, nor did she have the crazy, glowing eyes or green skin. No, Cora looked somewhat human at least in a very peculiar way. She had smooth, almost metallic skin that shimmered under light. Her eyes were a bright shade of purple, and her long silver hair almost looked like it belonged to someone from a science fiction movie. Cora had a calm, almost otherworldly presence, but she was a good roommate. So far, Jake, on the other hand, was just your average guy, an ordinary 20-something-year-old who liked to watch TV, play games, and get into trouble with his friends. His life had taken an unexpected turn when he agreed to rent out the spare room in his apartment. The catch? The person moving in was Cora, an alien who had come to Earth on a diplomatic mission. "Morning, Cora," Jake called out as he grabbed a mug from the cabinet and filled it with coffee. "Good morning, Jake," Cora responded in her soft, melodic voice. "I see you're already awake and in a rush as usual." Jake smiled. "You know it. Gotta get this coffee to start the day." Cora nodded, her purple eyes flicking over to him for a second before going back to her device. Jake couldn't help but notice the quiet beauty that came with her presence. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met before, even though she wasn't. From Earth, Cora had a way of making him feel comfortable, like they had known each other for much longer than a month. As Jake sat down on the couch with his coffee, a sudden sneeze caught him off guard. It wasn't a small sneeze, it was loud. The kind that echoes across the room, making everything else seem to pause for a moment. Jake quickly covered his face, hoping Cora wouldn't make a big deal out of it. However, Cora's reaction was anything but ordinary. She froze, her purple eyes wide with surprise, staring at Jake with an expression that made him immediately aware that something wasn't quite right. The air in the room seemed to shift, and Jake could feel a slight tingling sensation on his skin. Sorry about that," Jake said awkwardly, trying to brush it off with a nervous laugh. A sneeze. But Cora's gaze remained fixed on him, and she didn't speak for a moment. Jake started to feel uncomfortable, unsure of what was happening. "Jake," Cora said slowly, her voice unusually serious. "That sneeze? It's not like anything I've ever encountered before." Jake blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "It's just a sneeze. Happens to everyone." Cora tilted her head, her silver hair swaying slightly. "For my species, the reaction was more than just a sneeze. It was a biological response." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Wait, what do you mean biological response? It's just a sneeze." Cora's expression softened, and she stood up, walking over to Jake. "I know you don't understand, but where? I come from certain actions trigger ... responses. It's difficult to explain, but your sneeze it did something to me, something that I don't think you intended." Jake didn't know what to say. He had no idea his sneeze could do something to an alien. In fact, he wasn't even sure if Cora was joking or being serious. It was hard to tell sometimes with her. But there was a sincerity in her voice that made him believe she wasn't playing around. "I didn't mean to, Cora. It was just a sneeze." "Honestly, I didn't think it would cause this," Jake explained, holding up his hands in defense. "I don't even know why it's such a big deal." Cora seemed to think for a moment, her bright purple eyes scanning his face. She took a deep breath, almost as if she were preparing herself for something. "Where I come from, certain gestures can trigger strong instincts," Cora said. "Not just physical reactions, but emotional and instinctual ones." Jake was still processing her words. "So you're saying my sneeze made you feel something?" Cora nodded. "Yes, it activated something within me, a kind of deep connection. It's hard to explain in human terms, but I've never experienced it before. Your sneeze, it triggered something powerful, something beyond just a reaction. Jake couldn't help but laugh a little, despite the oddness of the situation. Well, I didn't exactly plan to turn my sneeze into an intergalactic bonding moment. Cora chuckled lightly, but the tension in the room remained. It wasn't intentional on either of our parts, but now we have to figure out what to do about it. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure of how to proceed. Okay, so what happens now? Cora seemed to hesitate before walking toward the kitchen, her long silver hair flowing behind her like a glimmering curtain. I'm not sure. But for now, let's not panic. We'll figure it out together. Jake nodded, trying to calm his nerves. This was starting to feel like more than just an awkward sneeze. What had he gotten himself into? But he wasn't the type to back down easily, and if he had to deal with this strange situation, at least he had Cora by his side. They both stood. In the kitchen, the odd tension still hanging in the air, but a quiet understanding passed between them. Whatever this was, they would face it together. For now, though, Jake decided to take a deep breath. I guess we can figure it out after breakfast. Cora smiled gently. That sounds good to me. And for the first time since the sneeze, Jake felt like maybe everything would be okay. The next few hours were a blur. Jake couldn't stop thinking about what had happened after his sneeze. It wasn't just the sneeze itself, it was the way Cora had reacted. She seemed to take it so seriously, like it was something that had never happened before in her life. The whole thing felt like some kind of weird misunderstanding, but the look in Cora's eyes told him this wasn't just a simple mixed dash-up. Jake walked around the apartment, trying to shake the odd feeling that had settled over him. Sure, if he was still imagining things, or if there was more to it than he realized. All he knew was that Cora's words kept echoing in his mind. It triggered something powerful, something beyond just a reaction. Cora hadn't said much more after that. She had left the kitchen and returned to her room, and Jake had decided to give her some space. He needed time to think too. What was he supposed to do with this new information? What did it all mean? His thoughts were interrupted when he heard Cora's soft voice calling from the living room. Jake, I think we need to talk, she said, her tone calm but firm. Jake sighed. He wasn't sure he was ready for another strange conversation, but he walked into the living room anyway. Cora was sitting on the couch, looking thoughtful. She had her legs crossed, and her purple eyes were focused on the floor. About what? Jake asked, sitting down beside her, keeping a safe distance. The tension in the air was still thick. Cora turned to look at him, her expression serious but not angry. About what happened earlier, she said slowly. I know you probably think I'm overreacting, but what you did, it triggered something in me, something I can't ignore. Jake leaned back on the couch, crossing his arms over his chest. I don't get it. I just sneezed. Why is it such a big deal? Cora sighed. It's hard to explain, but I'll try where I come from. Certain actions, things that may seem normal to you, can cause biological and emotional reactions in us. It's not something we control. It just happens. Jake frowned.
Ow!
So, my sneeze. Did something to you? Yes, Cora said, nodding. It's like an instinct that I can't turn off. And when you said bro after sneezing, it created a kind of connection. It's not anything you did on purpose, and I'm sure you didn't mean for it to happen, but it's real, and I need you to understand that. Jake didn't know what to say. His mind was racing, trying to wrap itself around the idea that a sneeze, something so simple, could cause such a strong reaction in an alien. He felt a bit overwhelmed by it all. I don't know what to do with this information. I mean, I didn't even know I could have that kind of effect on you. Cora smiled faintly. I don't blame you. I didn't expect it either. And I'm sure this is confusing for you. It's confusing for me too. It was a moment of silence. Between them, Jake looked at Cora, studying her face. Despite the strange circumstances, he found himself admiring how composed she was. Her alien features were unlike anything he had ever seen, but there was something calming about her presence. Do you want me to stop being around you? Cora asked quietly, breaking the silence. Because if this is too much for you, I can move out. I don't want to make things uncomfortable for you. Jake quickly shook his head. No, that's not what I meant. I don't want you to leave. It's just ... I didn't expect any of this. I've never had a roommate like you before. I don't know the rules of alien biology or anything like that. Cora's purple eyes softened, and she reached out, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder. You don't need to know all the rules. I think we need to figure out how to move forward. Whatever happens, I want us to stay comfortable with each other. I don't want you to feel awkward every time you sneeze. Oh, Jake chuckled nervously. I don't think I can control my sneezes, Cora. They just happen. Cora laughed too, and for the first time since the incident, the tension in the room seemed to ease. I'm not asking you to control your sneezes, but maybe we should set some boundaries. I don't want to put you in a position where you feel like you're walking on eggshells. That sounds fair, Jake agreed. I guess we could start by not sneezing near each other too often. Cora raised an eyebrow. It might be difficult, don't you think? But I appreciate the humor. It helps. Jake smiled. He felt a little better knowing that Cora wasn't mad at him. Still, he couldn't ignore the fact that something strange was going on between them. He wasn't sure how this would affect their living situation, but he didn't want things to get weird. So, what now? Jake asked, leaning back into the couch. Do we just ... forget it happened? Cora shook her head slowly. I don't think we can forget, but we can try to understand it better. Maybe with time it won't be such a big deal. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settling over him once again. This was no longer just a weird living arrangement. It was something more complicated. But at least Cora wasn't making him feel like he was walking on thin ice. For the first time, Jake felt like they might actually make it work as roommates. Think we can make this work? Jake said with a small smile. Just ... no more unexpected sneezing, okay? Cora laughed softly, her eyes twinkling. I'll do my best, Jake. And with that, a strange but silent understanding passed between them. The bond had been made, and there was no turning back. But whatever happened, they would face it together. They weren't just roommates anymore. They were learning how to navigate the unexpected, one sneeze at a time. The days that followed the sneeze incident were a bit awkward, but surprisingly, Jake and Cora managed to settle into a new normal. Cora had taken a step back from the situation, giving Jake space to process everything that had happened. She didn't seem to be affected by it as much as Jake was. The whole thing seemed to have faded into the background. But Jake couldn't quite shake the feeling that something was still off. Something had changed between them. Even if he couldn't fully understand what it was. Over the next few days, Jake found himself constantly second-guessing his actions. Was he being too casual around Cora? Was he making things more awkward than they needed to be? He had been living with Cora for a month now, and their odd living arrangement had started to feel more like a regular friendship at least until that sneeze. Cora, on the other hand, was remarkably calm. It was almost like she was unbothered by the incident. She continued to go about her routine, reading, meditating, and working on various alien technologies she had brought with her. She had been quiet about the whole situation, and Jake hadn't brought it up again either. It was like they had both silently agreed to move past it without discussing it further, but Jake couldn't help it. He felt a strange curiosity bubbling. Inside him, he wanted to know more about what had really happened. He needed to understand what kind of connection his sneeze had triggered in Cora. Every time he tried to ask her about it, though he felt like he might be crossing some invisible line, Cora was so composed, but Jake couldn't help feeling that she was hiding something. One evening, after dinner, Jake finally decided to ask her. They were sitting on the couch together, both watching a movie, when Jake turned to her. Cora, can I ask you something? Jake asked, his voice quiet. Cora glanced at him, her purple eyes soft. Of course. What's on your mind, Jake? I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I just don't understand how a sneeze can cause ... whatever happened between us. You said it triggered something, but I don't really get it. Cora seemed to pause, her expression becoming serious. I know it's difficult to understand. For your species, it might just be a sneeze, but for mine, it's more than that. You see, my species has a deep connection to certain biological signals, sounds, movements, even gestures. When you sneezed, your body produced a certain vibration, a certain energy. It triggered something inside me that I've never experienced before. It's an instinctual response. Jake furrowed his brow, trying to make sense of her explanation. So my sneeze created some sort of connection between us, like a bond or something. Cora nodded. Yes, but it's more than that. It's not just a simple connection, something we've evolved to feel. When an energy like that resonates with us, it forms a kind of resonance, a signal that our species responds to. It's not romantic, at least not in the way you might think, but it's strong. It's powerful even. Jake leaned back, processing what Cora had said. So this isn't something you can control? Either, no, Cora said quietly. It's something that happens without warning. And it's not just your sneezes, the way your body reacted, the way you said bro after it, ... It affected me in a way I didn't expect. Jake let out a long sigh. This is so weird. I didn't mean to cause any problems. I just sneezed, and I didn't think anything of it. I know you didn't mean it, Cora said reassuringly. It's not your fault. I just wanted to make sure you understood that it wasn't a normal reaction. I didn't expect it either, and I'm still trying to figure it out. There was a brief silence between them. Jake wasn't sure if he was relieved or more confused than ever. He wanted to believe that everything was fine, that the sneeze had simply been a strange accident, and nothing more. But Cora's explanation had opened his eyes to a whole new side of things. He had no idea that something as simple as a sneeze could be so significant to an alien species. What happens now? Jake asked, looking over at Cora. Cora smiled gently. Now we keep living our lives? We don't need to make this a bigger deal than it is. If it helps, we can set more boundaries, make sure we're both comfortable. But I don't want you to feel like you can't be yourself around me. I value our friendship. Jake nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He had been worried that Cora might want to leave or that their living situation would become unbearable. But she seemed to be okay with everything, and that reassured him more than anything. I guess that sounds good, Jake said with a small smile. I just don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I've never had a roommate before, let alone an alien roommate. Cora chuckled. I understand. This is all new to me too. I never expected that sharing a space with a human would come with such ... unexpected surprises. Jake laughed, feeling a little lighter. Yeah, me neither. I think we're both learning how to handle this. They fell into a comfortable silence, watching the rest of the movie. For the first time since the sneeze incident, Jake felt like things were normal again. He didn't have all the answers, and he wasn't sure if he ever would. But one thing was certain. Living with Cora, an alien, was never going to be boring. As the evening went on, they talked more about their lives, their experiences, and what brought them to this point. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it felt good to be open with each other. Even though their living situation was unusual, Jake realized that it wasn't so different from living with any other roommate. The only difference was the occasional, weird moment like the sneeze that brought them closer together. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. Jake had almost forgotten about the strange incident. Almost life had returned to a comfortable rhythm with Cora. They went through their days like roommates, sharing meals, watching shows, and even playing video games together. But there were moments when Jake would catch himself thinking about what Cora had said about their connection, the strange energy triggered by his sneeze. It wasn't that he was afraid of it, it was just unexpected. He wasn't sure how to handle it. Cora, however, seemed perfectly at ease. She had her usual calm demeanor, and everything felt as though they had moved on. They didn't talk about it much after their heart-to-heart, and that was fine with Jake. He wasn't sure if he was ready for another conversation about it just yet. Besides, things seemed to be normal, and that was all that mattered, right? Is until one morning when Jake woke up with an overwhelming sense of unease. He wasn't sure when nothing had changed. Cora was still her usual self, doing her alien thing, reading through strange-looking books and working on her gadgets. But that feeling like something was just around the corner refused to leave him. It started with the smallest of things. Cora had begun acting a little differently in the last few days. She wasn't exactly distant, but there was a new layer to her behavior, a quiet energy that Jake couldn't quite place. She had started to ask more questions about Earth, about human relationships, and about what it meant to live with someone. It wasn't as if she was suddenly fascinated by Jake, but there was an intensity behind her words, a curiosity that made Jake wonder if it had something to do with their previous conversation. One morning, as they sat at the table for breakfast, Jake couldn't take it anymore. Something was definitely off. He couldn't pretend everything was just fine when it clearly wasn't, so he decided to ask Cora about it. The question had been lingering on his mind for days. "Cora," Jake began cautiously, "is everything okay? You've been acting a little ... different lately." Cora put down her device and looked at him, her purple eyes locking with his. She seemed to consider his question for a long moment before responding. "I'm not sure what you mean, Jake," she said softly. "I'm just adjusting. Trying to understand more about Earth, I suppose." Jake studied her face. It wasn't that she was hiding anything, it was just that Cora always seemed so calm, so controlled. She was always so careful with her words, with her actions. But there was something new in her gaze now, something that reminded him of their first conversation. "You've been asking a lot of questions," Jake said, leaning forward. "About me, about humans, about what it's like to be, well, human. It's different from how we used to talk." Cora smiled faintly. "I suppose it is. But I'm just trying to understand more about you, Jake. About why your species reacts the way it does. About why things like sneezing and saying bro make such a difference." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I told you I didn't mean to trigger anything. It was just a sneeze." Cora's smile faded, and she sighed. "I know, and I don't want you to feel responsible for it, but I've been thinking a lot about it. I've never experienced anything like that before. It's not just a physical thing. There's something deeper, something that's hard to ignore." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean by something deeper?" Cora hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly as she searched for the right words. "When your body reacted to mine, when you sneezed, there was a shift. A bond, if you will. Not a human bond, not a romantic one, but it was something I wasn't expecting, something I don't know how to control." Jake sat back, stunned. "Wait, are you saying that sneeze created some kind of connection between us?" Cora nodded slowly. "Yes, but it's not like what you think. It's not something I wanted, Jake. It's just how my body works. It's a biological response. I don't know how to explain it fully. It's like an ancient part of me has been awakened by that one simple act, but it's not something I can turn off." Jake ran his hand through his hair. "So what does that mean for us?" Cora leaned forward, her expression soft but serious. "It means I've been trying to understand it, trying to figure out what it all means. I'm not sure where this goes, Jake, but I don't want you to feel like you need to avoid me or act different around me. I just need you to understand that I'm still me." Jake swallowed. "I don't know what to say. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'm just ... I'm just trying to live my life." Cora reached out and placed a hand on his. "No. And I'm not asking you to change who you are. But I need to know if you're okay with this. If you're okay with me." Jake looked down at their hands, Cora's fingers gently resting on his. It was a simple gesture, but it carried so much weight. Cora wasn't asking for anything from him, but she wanted him to understand. She wanted to be sure that he wasn't scared of whatever strange connection had been formed between them. "Of course. I'm okay with you, Cora," Jake said, his voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere. We've been through weird stuff together already. I don't think this will be the last of it." Cora smiled warmly. "Thank you, Jake. That means a lot to me." They sat in silence for a moment, the tension between them easing. It was still strange, this new dynamic between them, but it didn't feel as overwhelming as it had before. Jake realized that he didn't need all the answers. He didn't need to figure out everything about Cora's alien biology or their strange connection. All he needed to do was be there for her, and she would be there for him. The rest of breakfast passed in easy conversation, and for the first time in a while, Jake felt like everything was going to be okay. Whatever strange bond had been formed, whatever had been triggered by a simple sneeze, he knew they would figure it out together. And in that moment, Jake felt a small but undeniable sense of peace settle over him. They were roommates, yes, but maybe they were becoming something more. Not in the way he had first feared, but in a way that was built on understanding, trust, and an unexpected bond. And that was enough. The days after their conversation felt strangely normal, though the weight of the earlier discussion still hung in the air. Jake tried to act like everything was fine, but every now and then, he'd catch himself stealing a glance at Cora. He was still trying to understand the connection that had been formed between them. Was it something he should be worried about, or was it just a biological quirk of hers? It was hard to tell. Cora, however, was as calm as ever. Her usual routine hadn't changed. She would spend her time tinkering with gadgets, reading, or occasionally meditating. The alien seemed at ease, unaffected by the bond they had shared at least. That's how it appeared to Jake. But that didn't stop him from wondering. Cora's curiosity about Earth and human behavior was becoming more apparent each day. She asked about everything, from the simplest aspects of human life to deeper questions about emotions and relationships. Jake had no problem answering most of her questions, but some of them made him pause. How could he explain the complexity of human feelings when he himself wasn't entirely sure about his own? It was a Friday night when Jake found himself facing another strange situation. They had been hanging out, watching an old movie. Jake didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. But suddenly, Cora turned to him with a question that caught him off guard. "Jake, do you ever feel like you're being pulled in two directions?" Cora asked, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity he hadn't noticed before. Jake blinked. "Pulled in two directions? What do you mean?" Cora hesitated, as if she were choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking about this bond we have. Its connection. It's strange, Jake. I don't know if you feel it, but I can sense it. It's like there's something between us that I can't explain. Something that's different from what I'm used to." Jake's stomach tightened. He wasn't sure what to say. He had never expected that one sneeze could lead to something like this strange bond, this growing sense of connection. He had thought it would fade, that it would be forgotten. But it hadn't gone away. Why? And now Cora was asking him if he felt the same way. "I don't know," Jake said slowly. "I feel it too, but I don't really understand it. It's like, every now and then, it's like something pulls me toward you, but I'm not sure what it is. It's not like anything I've ever experienced before." Cora nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I've been trying to ignore it, but it's hard. I keep wondering if this is just a side effect of our species, or if it's something more. It's not like the bond I've had with others of my kind. It feels different." Jake felt a wave of confusion wash over him. "So ... what does that mean for us?" Cora sighed, running a hand through her silver hair. "I wish I knew, Jake, but I think we both need to figure it out. Can't pretend. It's not there. But we also can't force something that isn't meant to be." Jake leaned back in the chair, trying to process her words. "Yeah, I get that, but how do we figure it out? I'm not sure what to do. I don't want to make things awkward, but I also don't want to ignore something that's real." Cora gave him a small, reassuring smile. "We don't have to figure it out right away. Maybe we just need time. Time to see how we feel and what this connection means. But we don't have to rush into anything." Jake nodded slowly, relief washing over him. Cora's words made sense. There was no need to force anything. They had both been through enough change in such a short time. He could take a step back and let things unfold naturally, whatever that meant. For the next few days, things settled into a comfortable routine. They went back to watching movies together, hanging out in the evenings and talking about random things. There was a kind of peace that had returned between them. It was almost like things were back to how they used to be, before the sneeze incident, before any of the weird connection between them had happened. But Jake could still feel it, the unspoken tension. It was there, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting to be addressed again. One afternoon, as Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, Cora walked in, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Jake," she said, her voice full of energy, "I've been thinking, what if we tried something new? Something to clear the air, I guess." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? Cora leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. I think we need to do something together. That's just ... normal, like a human experience. Something simple. To remind us that this whole bond thing doesn't have to be so serious? Jake laughed, surprised. Okay, like what? A bowling night? A road trip? Cora smiled. I was thinking something a little simpler. How about we cook a meal together? I've seen humans do it on TV shows, and I think it would be fun. You teach me how to make something Earth-style, and I'll show you some of my species cooking techniques. Jake grinned. I like that idea. We can try making spaghetti or maybe something with pizza. I'll show you the basics. Cora's eyes lit up. Pizza? That sounds amazing. I've heard so much about it but never had the chance to try making. All right, it's a deal, Jake said, standing up from the table. Let's get to work then. I'll show you the secrets of making the perfect pizza. They spent the next couple of hours in the kitchen working together to prepare. A meal Cora was surprisingly skilled with her hands, though she had some unique ways of doing things. It was fun, and for the first time in a while, Jake felt like they were just two people, two friends, enjoying each other's company. As they sat down to eat, Jake realized that maybe this was the best way forward.
Hey!
They didn't need to force anything. They didn't need to rush into any decisions. They could just enjoy the time they had together, let whatever was happening between them unfold in its own time, as they shared the pizza, laughing about their cooking mishaps. Jake realized that whatever connection had formed between them, it wasn't something that needed to be figured out in a day. It was just part of their strange and unexpected journey together. And for now, that was enough. The weeks passed, and Jake and Cora's living arrangement became even more comfortable. What had started as a strange and awkward situation, involving an unexpected bond triggered by a simple sneeze, had evolved into something resembling a real friendship. They were learning how to live together, how to communicate, and how to navigate the quirks of their different worlds. Jake had stopped overthinking things. The connection he and Cora shared was still there, lingering like an unspoken agreement between them, but it wasn't something that made him nervous anymore. It wasn't something that controlled their daily lives. They could still laugh together, argue about the best pizza toppings, and even play video games without thinking about the strange thing that had happened when his sneeze set off that weird connection. Cora seemed more at ease, too. She had stopped asking so many questions about human emotions, understanding that Jake didn't always have the answers. She had learned to appreciate the simplicity of life on Earth, the small moments of quiet, the beauty of nature, and oddly enough, the comfort of eating pizza with someone who didn't expect anything more than friendship. But even with all the calm that had settled between them, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something would change again. He wasn't sure when or how, but he could sense that the dynamic between them was still in motion, still growing, still changing. Every now and then he'd catch Cora staring at him with a look in her eyes that was hard to read. It wasn't the usual curiosity. It was something deeper, something that made his heart race in ways he didn't fully understand. One evening, after a quiet dinner together, Jake and Cora were sitting on the couch, watching a documentary about space exploration. Jake was tired, his eyelids heavy from a long day of work, but he didn't want to seem rude. Cora, on the other hand, was completely focused on the screen, her eyes wide with fascination as she watched the footage of distant planets and strange cosmic phenomena. Jake couldn't help but smile as he watched her. She looked so different when she was absorbed in something. She was always calm, always composed, but in that moment, she looked like someone completely in awe of the world around her. It reminded him of why he had agreed to let her move in. The first place, her curiosity, her intelligence, her quiet way of seeing things that no one else did. Do you ever miss it? Jake asked softly, breaking the silence. Cora turned to him, her purple eyes meeting his with a curious expression. Miss what? She asked. Space. I mean, you're from there. You've probably seen things that I can't even imagine, Jake said, feeling a little embarrassed by the question. He hadn't meant to pry, but the words slipped out before he could stop them. Cora didn't seem offended. Instead, she smiled, her eyes softening. Yes, I've seen a lot, but I don't miss it the way you think I might. There's something about Earth that's Different. It's not as vast or as mysterious as the universe. But there's something beautiful about living here. I think it's the people, the connections that are possible. I've never had that before. Jake wasn't sure how to respond to that. He wasn't used to being the subject of such a serious conversation, especially not with someone like Cora. But he felt a strange warmth in his chest at her words. And for the first time in a while, he realized that he had grown to care about her in a way that went beyond their strange living situation. You know, Jake said, feeling bold, I never expected this. When I agreed to let you move in, I thought it would be weird, like really weird. But it's been ... good. I didn't think I'd actually get along with an alien, but here we are. Cora chuckled softly. I think I would have said the same thing if I had been in your shoes, but you've made this easier. You've made it ... comfortable. Jake looked over at her, his heart racing slightly. The words hung in the air, but he didn't know how to continue. He wasn't sure what was happening between them, but he knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. There was a part of him that wanted to ask Cora if she felt the same way he did, but he didn't want to make things awkward. What if she didn't feel the same? What if their connection was only something she couldn't control, something biological that meant nothing more than a passing feeling? Just as he was about to speak, Cora turned to him again, her eyes bright. Jake, I've been thinking, she said slowly. Maybe it's time we talk about ... what happens next. What we do with this ... connection. It's been there for a while now, and I think we both feel it, but I don't want to move too fast. I don't want to make any decisions without knowing how you feel. Jake blinked, surprised by her directness. Wait, you feel it too? Cora nodded. Yes. I didn't want to say anything at first because I wasn't sure if it was just me. But now I know. There's something between us, something that goes beyond just roommates. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't want us to ignore it. Jake's heart raced. He had felt it too, but hearing Cora admit it made everything feel so real, so tangible. He had known that there was something between them, something that neither of them could fully explain. But hearing Cora talk about it made him realize that maybe this wasn't just a fleeting connection. Maybe it was something deeper. I think I feel it too, Jake admitted, his voice low, but I'm scared. I don't know what this means, Cora. I don't know if it's just something temporary or if it's something ... more.
Us?
Softened, and she reached out, placing her hand gently on his. We don't have to know everything right now. We can figure it out together, Jake. We don't have to rush. But we shouldn't ignore it either. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. Jake smiled, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Maybe they didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a while, he realized that wasn't necessary. He didn't need to know everything. All he needed to do was take the next step with Cora by his side, and with that, Jake felt a sense of peace wash over him. Whatever this connection was, whatever the future held, he knew they would face it together. That was enough for him,